was Sir Robert Sibbald. Sir Robert Sibbald, son of David Sibbald and Margaret Boyd, was born on the 15th of April 1641. His family moved to Kipps Castle in the Bathgate Hills after he was born to avoid plague. Robert Sibbald's family descended from the ancient family of the Sibbalds of Balgony in Fife. Robert's father, David Sibbald, third brother to Sir James Sibbald, knight, baronet of Rankiller, and keeper of the Great Seal under the Earl of Kinnoul while he was Chancellor, after which he lived privately upon his own fortune, was a man of mild spirit, very civil and kind to his relations and acquaintances. He died the year of 1660. He was 71 years old. Robert's mother was the eldest daughter of Robert Boyd of Kipps, Linlithgowshire. In his autobiography, Sibbald describes his mother as a virtuous and pious matron of great sagacity and firmness of mind, and very careful of my education. Robert had 4 older siblings: Anna, the oldest, then Robert, Margaret, and George, who all died before the age of 4 years old. Robert states in his biography that he came into the world hooded, a term used to describe being born with the placenta sitting on the baby's head. His taste for literature was apparent at a very early age, for he quaintly relates that, while I was a child in my nurse's arms, my grandfather did observe my inclination for letters, for when I cried and wept upon any occasion, I stilled upon the giving me the Psalms of Buchanan he kept in his pocket. He began his studies at the grammar school in Cupar in 1650. But the turmoil caused during the invasion of Scotland by Cromwell forced his family to take refuge in Dundee. The following year, in 1651, he witnessed the sack of Dundee by General Monk. My parents removed me with them to Dundee, where we were when the town was taken by storm. My father was hurt with a strike given to him by a footman with a carabin. We were all plundered, and lost in jewels, silverwork, and money, and all the furniture of the house to a great value. We sold some meal to get a pass, and to pay for our transportation, where I went on foot from the ferry to Cupar, there not being enough money to purchase a horse for me. In the time the English were storming the town, there was a battery erected by them, from which they fired cannon and muskets into the High Street, from the Bannock Raw, opposite to the Morrow Gate. The townsmen had put up a sconce of deals in the middle of the street. My sister, Giles, a child of 8 years of age, had passed somewhat higher than the sconce, and was exposed to their view. I ran after her to bring her back, and they fired at us in returning. The ball missed us and battered upon the street. I took it up and brought it with me. Sibbald was educated at the Royal High School. Whilst there, Robert Leighton, Bishop of Dunblane and Archbishop of Glasgow, was principal. Under the tuition of the saintly prelate, Sibbald made great advances in his studies and confessed that he was influenced in the direction of a serious and good life by the advice of his principal. I shunned the plays and divertissements that other students followed, he writes, and read much in my study, for which my fellows gave me the name of Diogenes in Dolio. Like many other Scottish matrons, Robert's mother Margaret wished to devote her son to the church, but the dissensions amongst the numerous sects at the time gave him a disgust of them. His opinion of the religious questions of the day is put tersely and truthfully. I saw none could enter to the ministries without engaging in some of these factions, and exposing their interests. Upon this consideration, I fixed upon the study of medicine, wherein I thought I might be of no faction, and might be useful in my generation, if not here, elsewhere. Upon which consideration I resolved to go abroad to prosecute that study, and see the world, and know men. In March 1660, Sibbald embarked in a Dutch frigate, and went to Holland, where he studied at Leiden for a year and a half under several of the most famous professors of his time. On this occasion he published an inaugural dissertation entitled De Variis Speciebus. Having completed his course at Leiden, he went on tour through the continent, remaining at Paris for 9 months. His studies here were principally directed towards botany, clinical surgery and anatomy, and shortly afterwards he obtained his degree as a doctor of medicine at Angers. Thence he returned to his home country at the end of October 1662. During his absence on the continent, his father had died, deeply involved in debt in consequence of his losses at the siege of Dundee, and young Sibbald devoted himself with an intense ardour to clearing off the liabilities of his parents. He applied himself with energy to the practice of medicine, and soon gathered around him a large circle of patients. The design I proposed to myself, he writes, was to pass quietly through the world, and content myself with a moderate fortune, and it was a dozen of years after I came here before I resolved to marry. Whilst abroad prosecuting his studies, Sibbald had become acquainted with Sir Andrew Balfour, son of Sir Michael Balfour of Denmiln in Fife, one of the most eminent physicians of his time, and the acquaintance was renewed when Sir Andrew settled in Edinburgh. He and Sibbald projected and set out the first botanic garden in Scotland, having obtained a portion of the ground belonging to Trinity Hospital for that purpose. Sibbald was a good friend of Patrick Murray, second Lord of Elibank and the Laird of Livingston, later known as Livingston. Patrick Murray was a botanical engineer and designed and built a size-sick garden consisting of over 1,000 species of plants and seeds at Livingston Peel. This would be the inspiration for Sibbald creating the Edinburgh Botanic Gardens. Sibbald and his mother lived at Kipps Castle for 2 years, up until his mother's death in 1672. He became proprietor of the estate of Kipps and the mill of Turficken, which had belonged to his maternal grandfather, from which he took his territorial designation. During these 2 years, Robert fell in love with both the people and the land, and decided this is where he would live. The castle is an early 17th century 3-storey tower house, with a vaulted basement and 2 circular stair towers at the north-east angle and a rectangular one to south-west. The house was first constructed in 1625. Five years afterwards, he was married to Anna Lowes of Merchiston on Thursday, the 26th of April, 1677, and settled on the estate of Kipps. On the 27th of October, his wife Anna was 6 months pregnant. She fell on the stairs at Kipps, coming from the higher chamber in her slippers, and was injured. The twin boys were born at 5 and 6 a.m, which would have proved fatal for the newborns. The following year, they had a daughter, Catherine Sibbald, who was born on the 12th of October, 1678, at around 6:30 in the morning. Shortly after Catherine's birth, her mother Anna Lowes fell ill on the 17th of December after staying with her eldest sister. died of some fever on the 27th of December 1678, and Robert eventually got remarried to Anna Orrock in November 1682. The couple had 5 children together. Margaret Sibbald, born on the 22nd of March 1684. She died at the age of 4 from an unknown fever. Elizabeth Sibbald, born on the 9th of April 1685, died the following year. Elizabeth Sibbald, baptised 6th of August 1687, was named after her maternal grandmother. Eupham Sibbald was born 2nd September 1688 and named after Lady Dunker, her mother's father's sister, and Jean Sibbald, born the 4th of September 1690, named after Mistress Ramsay, her mother's sister. Jean died 2 years later of smallpox. In his autobiography, Sir Robert explains with great amplitude how he became acquainted with the Earl of Perth, and by what means that nobleman induced him to adopt the Roman Catholic faith. It is sufficient to state that he was blamed by the multitude for perverting the Earl himself, and only escaped assassination through the aid of John Graham of Claverhouse, Viscount of Dundee. He was made Burgess of Linlithgow on the 20th of January in 1673. He lived in Kipps Castle, south of Cockleroy in the Bathgate Hills. He owned a massive collection of artefacts which were given to the University of Edinburgh when he died. In 1682, he was knighted by the Duke of York, then the High Commissioner of Scotland, and was made physician of King Charles II on the 30th of September 1682, then later James VII. Sibbald was one of the founder fellows of the Royal College of Edinburgh and was elected president in 1684. In 1685, he was appointed the first professor of medicine at the University of Edinburgh and was later knighted and named King Charles II's physician. Furthermore, he was appointed the first ever Geographer Royal of Scotland in 1682 and began gathering resources and materials for a 2-volume work on geographical description, or Atlas of Scotland. Sibbald is also remembered for his study of whales. Originally, the blue whale was named after Sibbald, who first described it in Phalynologia Nova, after he found a stranded whale in the Firth of Forth in 1692. Although the blue whale is today usually classified in the genus Balænoptera, one authority still places it in a separate monotypic genus, Sibbaldus, and at one time being commonly referred to as Sibbald's rorqual, after the man who first described the species. Somewhat of a polymath, Sibbald described and illustrated the genus of the flowering plant Sibbaldia procumbens, which was named after him by Linnaeus following the creation of the binomial nomenclature for biological organisms. On the 12th of December 1685, he received a pension of £100 sterling from King James VII as his physician. He continued actively engaged in literature until his death. His books were sold on Tuesday the 5th of February of the following year for a very large sum of £342.17 shillings sterling. Sir Robert Sibbald died in August of 1722 at the age of 81.